There are moments in life when a person walks into your world and, from that instant on, the word coincidence simply stops applying. You can try to work backward through the timeline, hunting for the logical explanation. But somewhere underneath all that reasoning, you already know that logic was never really in charge here. This person didn't just wander into your life. They arrived deliberately, almost inevitably. And the moment they did, something shifted inside you, quietly, but for good. Even now, when you try to move forward, when you tell yourself the story is over, when you try to explain it all away with your head instead of your heart, something keeps pulling your attention back to them. It's not a desperate pull. It's the pull of something you recognize on a deeper level. If you're reading this right now, it isn't random. Meaningful messages tend to reach us exactly when we're ready to understand them. Carl Jung once observed that people who only look outward dream, while those willing to look inward wake up. And right now, something inside you is starting to stir awake. It's a kind of inner certainty that won't stay quiet, a feeling that this bond wasn't meant to just fade away and be forgotten. Maybe you're standing at a point where you feel split down the middle, stuck between holding on and letting go, stuck between believing what your heart tells you and doubting it because of what you're actually seeing play out. Silence tends to feed doubt. Distance can make even a strong, sure heart start questioning itself. You may have wondered whether you were imagining the intensity of it all, whether you built meaning out of nothing. But here's the thing, things that are only in our imagination fade with time. Illusions don't survive being tested. This one has survived. Your heart won't let this person go, and that's not random. Time hasn't dulled it. Pain hasn't erased it. Every attempt you've made to move on has somehow brought you right back to the same quiet truth. This person matters, not because your ego wants them to, but because something deeper in you recognizes them. This isn't obsession. Obsession is loud and anxious and demanding. What you're feeling is the opposite, calm, quiet, and much deeper. It exists underneath your everyday thoughts and expectations. It's patient. It shows up in still moments, in dreams, in sudden emotional waves that catch you off guard. It's the feeling of something that hasn't been resolved yet. Think back to when you first met this person. Something old awakened in you. It wasn't just chemistry. It wasn't just that you got along well. It was a strange sense of familiarity, like you'd somehow known them before this life even brought you together. The conversation itself might have been ordinary, but the energy behind it wasn't. Your body sensed both comfort and intensity at once, and that combination is rare enough to leave a lasting mark. Jung compared the meeting of two people to a chemical reaction. When two substances combine, something in both of them changes. And that's exactly what happened to you. Whether they'll admit it or not, it happened to them too. Connections that genuinely change us are never small things. They rearrange something inside us. They open doors that can't simply be shut again. Even now, in all this distance and quiet, they feel more than they let on. Some people process emotion outwardly. Others hold it all inside. Quiet doesn't mean nothing is happening. Sometimes it means there's too much happening with no outlet for it. Being around you stirred something in them that caught them off guard, something they weren't ready to deal with. So instead of leaning into it, they pulled back, hoping distance would settle what your presence had stirred up. It hasn't. Feelings like this don't need words to travel. In their quiet moments when nothing else is distracting them, you come to mind. Not because they're trying to think of you, but because the connection insists on it. They replay your conversations. They remember how being with you made them feel truly seen, and they notice how flat everything else feels by comparison, which unsettles them more than they'd admit. They're not distant because they don't care. They're distant precisely because they do. There are things happening inside them that were never yours to fix. Old wounds, a fear of being vulnerable, a fear of losing control, a fear of being seen at a depth they're not ready for. For some people, love itself feels dangerous, not because of the other person, but because of what it might expose in themselves. This is usually where a connection like this hits a wall. One person wakes up to it faster than the other. The other resists facing the reflection being shown to them. You became that reflection. You showed them parts of themselves they'd buried away, and instead of turning against you, they turned away from themselves. Jung once said that whatever stays unconscious will keep directing our lives while we mistake it for fate. Right now, they're being steered by things they haven't yet confronted. But once you've woken up to something, you can't go back to sleep. You can't unsee what you've seen, and you can't unknow what you now know. You showed up in their life to remind them what emotional honesty and real tenderness feel like. You touched something in them that had been dormant, and that kind of impact doesn't just disappear. It stays, it reshapes things, and it waits. Nothing meaningful happens by accident. If this connection was supposed to quietly end, it already would have. Instead, it keeps echoing back, through signs you notice, through dreams that feel more vivid than your waking life, through moments their name surfaces out of nowhere. These aren't distractions, they're signals, not telling you to go chase anything, but telling you to trust the process unfolding beyond your control. There's a real difference between forcing a door open and simply knowing it will open when the timing is right. It's completely valid to feel worn out. Loving someone deeply without clear answers is exhausting, but your hope isn't a weakness, it's intuition. And intuition doesn't shout, it waits quietly. Right now, something is shifting under the surface, even if it's not visible yet. Resistance is softening. Fear is being tested. A heart that had closed itself off is starting to soften under its own weight. And whether they say it out loud or not, losing you completely is becoming a scarier thought to them than the risk of trying again. This isn't the ending of your story. It's the pause before clarity arrives, the space where growth happens, the quiet before things align. You're not being told to just sit and wait blindly. You're being asked to stay grounded in who you are, to remain open without losing your footing. Jung also said that patience is what leads to real joy, not passive waiting, but grounded, steady patience. The kind that trusts timing without giving up your self-respect. The kind that recognizes what's real without needing to force it. As all of this settles into you, pay attention to what feels true without effort. Truth doesn't need to convince you of anything, it simply lands. And if your heart feels steadier instead of more anxious, take that as confirmation. Nothing is broken here, it's transforming. And in that transformation, you're being shaped just as much as they are. Something the analytical mind resists, because it craves answers, labels, and timelines. The soul, though, doesn't work that way. It uses uncertainty like a refining fire, burning away illusions, dependency, and false hopes until only the truth is left standing. What feels like waiting right now is actually becoming. You've probably noticed that ever since this connection entered your life, you're not quite the same person anymore. Your emotional awareness has grown sharper. Your standards have risen. You can no longer settle for shallow connection or half-hearted love. Something in you refuses anything less than what feels real, safe, and aligned. That's not a coincidence. That's the mark of a connection that touched you at a soul level. Sometimes a connection doesn't arrive to stay right away. Sometimes it arrives to wake you up first, to show you what's possible, to reveal what your heart genuinely needs instead of what you were taught to accept. And once you've been woken up like that, there's no going back to sleep. Even when the person isn't physically present, whatever truth they activated in you stays alive. That's why letting go feels so impossible right now, not because you're clinging to a person, but because you're holding on to a truth about yourself that was born through knowing them. You learned how deeply you're capable of feeling, how open your heart can actually be, how present and devoted you can show up, and the soul never abandons its own growth. You'll probably still have moments of doubt creep in, thoughts like, if this were real, wouldn't it be simpler? Or if they really cared, wouldn't they show it more clearly? Those questions are natural, but they come from the logical mind trying to measure something that doesn't follow a straight, rational path. Real soul-level connections rarely move in a straight line. They spiral. They return to the same lessons again and again, each time asking for a little more honesty, a little more courage, a little more integration. What makes this particular connection complicated isn't a lack of feeling. It's a mismatch in timing and readiness. You're ready to open up. They're still working through their own process, and readiness isn't something you can hand to someone else. It has to be earned through facing yourself, through confronting fears that have gone unaddressed for years, through choosing vulnerability over self-protection. There are moments when they almost reach out, moments when your name is right there on the tip of their tongue, Moments when they sit there holding their phone, mentally rehearsing what they might say. But fear steps in, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of not measuring up, fear of reopening something they don't yet trust themselves to handle. So they stay quiet, hoping enough time will fix what only courage actually can. And still, time keeps circling you back into their thoughts. Unresolved connections don't just vanish. They linger, they wait, they resurface whenever the noise dies down. Late at night, early in the morning, in the empty spaces of conversations that don't go anywhere, in relationships that don't have real depth. You become the quiet comparison they can't shake. This is also why you keep noticing signs lately, not to keep you stuck, but to keep you steady. Right when you start doubting your own intuition, something shows up to remind you that none of this is in your head. A song that speaks straight to your situation, a dream where the conversation finally plays out the way you need it to, a sudden memory that arrives feeling clear instead of painful. None of that is meant to drag you backward. It's meant to anchor you in trust. Trust doesn't mean waiting around in suffering. It means staying connected to yourself while letting whatever is meant for you find its own way back naturally. There's a quiet but powerful shift happening in you right now. You're learning the difference between attachment and alignment. Attachment says, I need this person in order to be okay. Alignment says, I'm already okay, and I trust that what belongs to me will find me through truth. That distinction changes everything. When you stop chasing clarity and start living it instead, the whole dynamic shifts on an energetic level. Something loosens. The pressure lets up. The connection stops running on anxiety and starts running on grounded presence. And that's exactly the state where a genuine reunion becomes possible. Because if they came back while you were depleted, doubting yourself, or shrinking to fit, you'd just repeat the same old pattern. But if they come back while you're centered, self-respecting, and whole, something entirely new has room to begin. Something healthier, something mutual. You're not being punished by this delay. You're being prepared to receive love without losing yourself in the process, prepared to notice real effort instead of chasing potential, prepared to meet them not from a place of needing validation, but from a place of standing solidly in your own worth. They feel this shift too, even if they can't quite name it. They sense you drawing your energy back inward. They sense that you're no longer waiting the same way you used to. And oddly enough, that's exactly what makes the connection feel more real to them, because it's no longer guaranteed. Now it has to be chosen. This is where fear starts losing its grip, because the idea of losing you entirely starts to feel real. And reality has a way of breaking through avoidance. The heart begins speaking louder than the defenses built to protect it. Memories soften. Regret creeps in. The desire to make things right starts to grow. You might notice sudden waves of calm, almost a kind of detachment, followed by bursts of emotion. That's alignment settling into place. You're no longer fighting the connection, but you're also no longer losing yourself inside it. You're simply allowing it to exist without trying to control how it turns out. That balance carries real power. It signals that you're ready for the truth, whatever shape it takes, and truth always responds to readiness. The path between you two isn't blocked. It's being cleared. Old misunderstandings are dissolving. Internal resistance is softening. Whatever felt chaotic before is quietly reorganizing itself beneath the surface. You don't need to do anything more right now. No convincing, no explaining, no proving yourself. Just stay present. Stay honest with yourself. Stay open without chasing. The rest will unfold in its own timing. As this next part of the journey plays out, you might start sensing it differently, not as longing anymore, but as quiet certainty. A knowing that doesn't need reassurance. A trust that doesn't rely on constant signs. Something is moving toward alignment, not rushed, not forced, but genuinely real. There comes a point where the longing softens into understanding, not because the connection has weakened, but because your relationship to it has changed. You stop asking why this is happening to you and start sensing that it's happening for you. That shift is subtle, but it runs deep. It's the moment pain starts turning into wisdom. You begin to see that this connection was never meant to consume you. It was meant to reveal you, to strip away what wasn't real, to expose the places where you'd abandoned yourself in the past, to teach you the difference between intensity and intimacy, between attachment and genuine devotion, between fantasy and truth. And once that lesson takes root, suffering loses its hold on you. You might notice your thoughts about them shifting too. They're no longer frantic or desperate. They arrive gently now, sometimes warm, sometimes clear, sometimes carrying a calm certainty that whatever happens next needs to be rooted in honesty rather than fear. That's a sign of emotional maturity forming in you. And this is where the connection reaches a real turning point. Because once one person in a bond like this grows, the whole dynamic is forced to respond. Energy seeks balance. When you stop chasing answers and start embodying them instead, everything around the situation adjusts. What felt stuck starts moving. What felt confusing starts making sense. They're feeling this too, even if they can't consciously explain why. Your energy no longer reaches them as need. It reaches them as presence, as a calm strength that can't be manipulated or brushed off. And that unsettles them far more than any amount of chasing ever could. Silence carries a different meaning now. It's no longer rejection. It's processing. It's confrontation with themselves. Life is asking them to look inward, to face the patterns they've relied on to feel safe: avoidance, emotional distance, control. Those strategies once protected them. Now, those same patterns are isolating them. There are moments when they feel a strong pull to come back, followed by moments of hesitation. That push and pull isn't really about you. It's about them standing at the edge of their own growth. Moving forward means risking vulnerability. Staying where they are means losing something real. That kind of tension can't hold forever. Here's what matters most for you to understand right now. How this connection resolves doesn't depend on how much you hope for it. It depends on how deeply you honor yourself. The more aligned you stay with your own truth, the clearer your path becomes. Whether that leads to reunion or release, it won't break you anymore. It will make you stronger. But something deep down already knows this connection carries something unfinished, not because it needs drama, but because it needs honesty. Words that were never said, feelings that were never fully shared, choices delayed by fear. None of that just disappears. It waits for courage. Jung once said that wherever we find our fear, that's exactly where our work lies. Right now, fear is standing in front of both of you, asking to be acknowledged. Your task has been to trust your intuition without losing yourself along the way. Theirs is to open their heart without hiding. Both of you are working through that slowly. Still, you might notice that the idea of reunion doesn't excite you the way it used to, not because you stopped caring, but because you now want depth instead of fantasy. You're no longer willing to mistake confusion for fate. You want clarity, presence, real effort, and that higher standard isn't pushing them away, it's calling them forward. This is where a lot of people misread connections like this. They assume they're meant to be endured endlessly, that suffering proves depth. But real soul-level bonds aren't meant to trap you in pain. They're meant to lead you back to yourself first. And then, if it's meant to be, back to each other in honesty. You're stepping into that alignment now. There may be moments ahead where communication reopens unexpectedly, a message that feels genuine, a conversation with more honesty in it than before, or simply an energetic shift that makes everything feel lighter and less strained. Don't rush any of it. Let it unfold naturally. Real reconnection can't be forced or rushed. And if fear comes up in you, fear of being hurt again, fear of hoping again, let it be there without letting it steer you. Fear here isn't a warning. It's a memory of old pain, not a forecast of what's ahead. You're not the same person you were when all this started. You're stronger now, clearer, more grounded. You no longer need to prove your worth through patience. Your worth is already established through how much you've grown. Notice how your body reacts when you think of them now. Less tension, less urgency, more ease. That's alignment. That's your soul settling into its own truth. What comes next isn't about waiting anymore. It's about allowing life to show you what's real, allowing love to meet you exactly where you stand rather than where you once had to beg, allowing this connection to either grow into truth or gently dissolve into understanding, without resentment either way. At this stage, the connection stops feeling like a question mark. It starts feeling like a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They simply show you exactly where you stand. You realize now that this bond was never meant to be chased. It was meant to be met, and meeting only happens once both people are standing fully in themselves. You may notice you no longer feel the need to justify your worth to anyone. You don't feel compelled to explain your emotions or defend how deeply you love. You know exactly who you are. You know how you love. And you know that real love doesn't require confusion to prove it's genuine. This inner steadiness changes the entire dynamic between you, because once you stop bending yourself to keep a connection alive, that connection is forced to respond honestly. It either rises to meet you or it reveals exactly where it can't. Both outcomes are forms of truth, and they're feeling that shift more clearly than ever. The space you once filled with effort isn't available in the same way anymore. Not because your heart is closing, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself. Your presence has become clean, no longer distorted by anxiety, no longer diluted by fear. That kind of presence confronts people. It brings whatever they've been avoiding straight to the surface, because emotion doesn't obey denial forever. There are moments now where they feel the full weight of what nearly slipped away, and the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. This is where real responsibility starts to form in them, not guilt, but responsibility. Responsibility for choices never made, words left unsaid, courage that kept getting delayed, and responsibility is the doorway to real change. Jung put it well when he said we aren't defined by what happened to us, but by what we choose to become going forward. You chose growth instead of fixation, integrity instead of chasing, self-respect instead of self-sacrifice. They're standing at the edge of that very same choice now. It asks them to dismantle old identities, to release defenses that once felt necessary, to admit to vulnerability where control used to rule. What matters now isn't speed, it's direction, and the direction is changing. You might sense moments of closeness, even without any actual communication. Sudden warmth, a feeling of calm instead of longing, a sense of knowing rather than hoping. That's not your imagination, that's resonance. When two people are truly aligned at a deep level, distance doesn't cut the connection, it only delays its expression. But that expression is coming, not through chaos or confusion, but through clarity. And clarity, when it arrives, won't ask you to shrink yourself. You're no longer the version of you who'd settle for breadcrumbs dressed up as fate. You're no longer impressed by potential that never turns into action. You now understand that love has to be lived, not just felt. This is exactly why everything has slowed down the way it has, because anything built before reaching this level of awareness would have collapsed under its own imbalance. One heart open, the other guarded, one ready, the other afraid. That dynamic could only ever lead to pain. What's being built now is different. If they come back, it will be with real intention, not out of curiosity or loneliness. Intention, accountability, presence, and a genuine willingness to meet you in the open space you now occupy. And if they don't come back, you won't be broken by it, because the true gift of this connection was never a guaranteed reunion. It was a return to yourself, a deeper self-trust, a clearer inner voice, a stronger emotional foundation. You now understand the difference between chemistry and true compatibility, between longing and alignment, between waiting and honoring timing without betraying yourself. This isn't the end of your story with love. It's the refinement of it, and whatever comes next will meet you exactly where you now stand. You might feel a calm kind of confidence rising, a sense that you'll be fine either way. That's not detachment, that's wholeness. That's your soul no longer bargaining for love, but simply allowing it. Notice how your life is opening back up. New clarity, new energy, new inspiration. That's not a distraction from this connection. It's proof that you're no longer trapped inside it. You're walking beside it now, not underneath it. And that changes everything, because love meant for you doesn't require you to vanish. And real love recognizes you fully once you stand as yourself. Something is preparing to resolve, not through force, but through honesty. Not through urgency, but through readiness. Stay open, stay rooted, stay discerning. The final chapter is close. There's a point where the soul stops asking what will happen because it already understands why everything unfolded the way it did. This is that point, not dramatic, not loud, just quietly settling into place. You feel it as a calm certainty in your chest, a knowing that doesn't need reassurance, explanation, or signs to hold up. You've moved from questioning into clarity. At this level, you're no longer gripping an outcome. You're aligned with truth, and truth moves at its own pace. You can see now that the delays weren't punishment, they were protection. If this had come together earlier, before either of you had grown through what you needed to, it would have collapsed under the weight of old, unhealed patterns. Love needs room to mature. Souls need time to become strong enough to hold what they recognize in each other. None of these lessons were optional, they were necessary. As fear begins to lose its grip, genuine awareness replaces avoidance, allowing both people to recognize the rare depth of their connection. Whether reunion comes soon or after a period of growth, it will be built on honesty, emotional maturity, and mutual presence rather than fear or uncertainty. At the same time, the greatest transformation has already taken place within you. You've stopped waiting to be chosen and have chosen yourself instead. By embracing self-worth, confronting old patterns, and finding peace regardless of the outcome, you've become whole on your own. From this place of inner strength, any relationship that enters your life must be healthy, reciprocal, and aligned with your values. True love never asks you to abandon yourself, and real clarity always brings peace. In the end, the purpose of this journey was not simply to find someone else, but to awaken your own capacity for authenticity, self-respect, and emotional freedom, allowing whatever unfolds next to be rooted in truth rather than fear.